Welcome to another wonderful Susannah Calloway audiobook. We are excited to have you with us. Before we begin the story, please like and subscribe to our channel and share it with friends. This allows us to continue adding free clean Western romance audiobooks for you to enjoy. The following title is copyrighted by Susannah Calloway, Western romance author. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and enjoy the story. Sharing Secrets. Chapter 1. Exhausted, her head and shoulders resting against the side of the lurching stage coach, Francesca tried to catch a little sleep. The other passengers managed it. The old lady next to her snored with her mouth open while both of the young men in the seat opposite leaned against each other and slept. It was the dead of night. The horses still followed the narrow trail with the driver cracking the whip over them every now and then. Francesca peered out the window. Nothing save darkness met her eyes. No lights, no distant fires, no star fallen to earth and bathing the world in an unearthly glow. Absolutely nothing out there that she could see. It was as though she'd been struck blind. In her hometown, the small city of Toledo, Ohio, there were always lights, somewhere. One couldn't walk down the street without passing under lamps lit to push away the darkness. Outlaws and thieves had to cut purses under the light of the street lamps. Shutting her eyes again, Francesca sought to pull sleep over her. Since she boarded the horrid stage over a week ago, she managed only a few hours of the lightest of naps. During one stop when the coach's wheel needed repair, she managed a whole 2 hours of uninterrupted rest. That was 5 days ago. Surely sheer exhaustion will force me to sleep. Yet, she managed only a light catnap until the stage struck yet another deep rut and jounced her into wakefulness. She'd never get to sleep at this rate. Pulling the letter from her pocket, she fingered it, not needing to read it. Francesca had read it so many times, she had it memorized by now. A letter in answer to her prayers. A man in Plum River, Wyoming territory, agreed to marry her. Staring out into the deep darkness, she pondered God's will in all her misery. What have I done to deserve all this? Her betrothed had angrily told her he'd rather marry Hecate's daughter than her. Her father had thrown her out of his house. So, the parish priest had taken her in, letting her sleep on a cot in the nave. He'd brought her food and hot tea. "I'm soiled, Father," she had sobbed in his arms. "Ruined. Dear child," he murmured. "God will surely smite the evildoer." "I have nowhere to go," she cried. "No man will marry me now. My own father has turned against me." Father Daniel shook his head sadly. "Then that is your father's sin, child. Not of your making. You are of pure heart. Never forget that. I need a husband, Father. What shall I do?" He pondered for a moment. "Well, Christ is always in need of brides." Surprised at such a suggestion, Francesca shook her head ruefully. "I would make a terrible nun." He chuckled lightly. "Not all are called to God's service, my dear. But, truly, there are men who will accept brides who were taken against their will." "Not in Toledo, Father." "Perhaps not." Leaving her to wipe her eyes with her kerchief, Father Daniel walked to his desk, rifled through a stack of newspapers and came back. "Read this, my dear." Her eyes blurred, Francesca read the section of paper he'd handed her. As she read, she stood up, unsteady, and leaned her hand against the wall for support. "Mail-order brides? What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting it, dear. Just trying to give you options. Men out west have no women to marry. None save those who have sold their bodies." "Saloon women?" His blue Irish eyes grew stern. "Judge not, Francesca," he said firmly, "lest ye be judged. Even Christ loved Mary Magdalena, the prostitute." Francesca blushed and lowered her eyes. "Forgive me, Father. I spoke in haste." "We must forgive those women," he murmured. "For we know not what they've gone through. Now, Francesca, I will telegraph this agency and explain your unique situation." "No. I shall be discreet." His kindly gaze made her throat tighten. You will not hide behind deceit, child. The man you marry must know of your situation and be compassionate. This was not your sin, but that of your attacker. If the potential groom accepts you as you are, then you will never have to hide behind a secret. No man will accept me. You do not know that. You may stay here and clean the church to earn your bread, and I will telegraph this agency. Weeks later, Father Daniel returned with the letter she now held in her hand. He gave her his blessing, a few dollars, and saw her to the stagecoach. Now she was riding in the coach more than 1,000 miles from Ohio toward a man named Charlie Castle in a town called Plum River, Wyoming. No wonder I can't sleep, she thought bitterly. Why would this man possibly want me? Dawn tinged the eastern horizon pink and purple as Francesca rubbed her sore eyes, craving sleep as no drunkard ever craved his whiskey. The driver yelled woe at the team, pulling on his reins. Sticking her head out the window, she saw the changing station come into view. A quick trip to the outhouse and maybe I can get 20 minutes of sleep. Maybe. Changing horses and drivers didn't take very long. If she was lucky, then maybe the driver might linger in the house and give her an extra 10 minutes. Staggering off the coach, grateful for the assisting hand from one of the young men, Francesca stretched her back and legs, feeling a little strength return. The old lady hobbled briskly toward the outhouse as the gentlemen tipped their hats and let her go first. Maybe when I'm that old, I will sleep anywhere, too. As she waited her turn, she shivered under the light brisk breeze. Gets a mite chilly in these parts, said a strong, masculine voice. Francesca glanced around, seeing an older man in a tall cowboy hat emerge from the station house. Yes, it's a little cold here. He glanced at the clear blue sky. Late September on the high plains. Yup, it do get cold, especially at night. When does it start snowing? He squinted. 'Nother month maybe. If we're lucky. Have you been to Plum River, Wyoming? She asked. All the time, miss. I tend to drive the stage there at times. Is it a nice town? Squinting again, he nodded. As nice at any town, I reckon. Good people? This time she received a shrug as well as the squint. Good people is as good people does, I reckon. Francesca gave up. After using the outhouse, she felt that if she returned directly to the seat and sat any longer than necessary, she'd cut off her own legs. Needing to be on her feet more than she needed sleep, she walked around a bit as the old lady resumed snoring inside the coach. The station crew changed horses and drivers quickly, and she climbed back up inside. I don't need sleep, she swore. Sleep's a waste of one's precious time. I could be doing 100 things at this minute. She sighed. If she had her knitting, she could have knitted a coverlet by now. No, 10 coverlets. The old lady woke with a start, and patted Francesca's hand. You'll be just fine, dear, she said, then nodded off again. Poking her head through the window, she called to the driver. How long before we reach Plum River? We'll be there by the day after tomorrow, miss. Ah, another 48 hours without sleep. Francesca thought she'd surely be dead by then. She considered asking the young men how long a human body could go without sleep before dying, but dropped the notion. Both snored in harmony with the old lady. A wheel broke. Delighted by this unfortunate occurrence, Francesca stretched out on the seat as the old lady and the young men exited the coach to argue with or offer advice as the horses were unhitched, set to rest and graze while the driver and shotgun repaired the wheel. Francesca managed 3 whole hours of uncomplicated rest. Afterward, she thought she might survive after all. Chapter 2. 2 days later, with eyes that burned with sleep lack, on legs that shook under her, Francesca carefully climbed down the coach steps. Blinking, she gazed at the town she would now call home. The light Wyoming breeze held a chill in its fingers, not exactly cold but with the promise of icy weather to come. The town itself consisted of a single broad dirt-packed road and tall clapboard buildings running up and down its length. Small houses set on even smaller dirt side streets lacked much in the way of flowers or gardens, making her wonder if they needed women inside to brighten them up. She'd been told there were few married women in Plum River, and fewer children playing in the streets. The driver climbed to the top of the coach to toss luggage down as the shotgun strolled into the station to talk with the master. A few people stood on the wooden platform, waiting for news, the mail, and possibly the passengers. The old lady embraced a man of middle years, and Francesca speculated they were mother and son. The young men greeted a trio of cowboys in their tall hats, spurs jingling at their boot heels. Charlie Castle knew when she would arrive. He was to greet her, she thought, yet no one approached her to introduce himself as her future husband. "I might be able to afford a night at the hotel, if it isn't too dear." Hunger gnawed at her gut, informing her she'd eaten almost all of the food she brought with her. A hotel and food? She didn't think she could do both. "I need sleep more than I need to eat." A canvas satchel dropped almost at her feet. Looking up, she found the driver tipping his hat to her. "Miss Delaney?" "Yes?" Francesca turned, half expecting Mr. Castle. Instead, she faced a small wizened man with the collar of a reverend at his throat, wearing a black coat and trousers. "I'm Reverend Sweetwater," he said, doffing his round bowler hat. "I'm here to invite you to stay a few days at my church." "I'm to meet someone." "Yes. Mr. Castle. But it is at Mr. Castle's request that you be given a roof over your head while you and he become acquainted with one another." A tension in her muscles that Francesca hadn't known was there, suddenly loosened. She may have arrived in Plum River to marry a man she'd never met, but deep down she dreaded marrying him straight from the stagecoach. This way, she had the opportunity to know him, even a little, before they married. "Thank you, Reverend," she said, shaking his hand briefly. "You are kind and generous." He beamed, his eyes wrinkling almost shut. "It's my pleasure, child. Now, is this your bag?" "No, please, let me carry it for you." "Come then, the church is this way. I have a small room attached to the building I used to live in while my house was being built. You will be comfortable there." She chuckled. "I certainly could use the sleep." "Oh, my heavens, I can imagine. I have traveled on one of those dreadful coaches in the past. Didn't sleep at all." "Will I be meeting Mr. Castle today?" Reverend Sweetwater shook his head. "He asked that you rest and refresh yourself first. He will call on you in the morning, if that is acceptable." "Yes, certainly. As it is almost supper time anyway, I invite you to dine with me, then you can rest. However, I fear, I'm not a very good cook. Perhaps I can repay some of your kindness by cooking for you?" His eyes wrinkled shut again as he smiled. "You've just answered my prayers, Miss Delaney." Chapter 3. Thus, after a filling meal of roasted chicken and potatoes, Francesca slept without dreaming on the narrow cot in the plain but comfortable room she was given. She rose the next morning, stiff and sore from the long trip, yet feeling as though she'd been reborn. The sun shone brightly through the tiny window as she washed and dressed, braiding her thick red-brown hair before coiling and pinning it to the nape of her neck. The good Reverend expected her at breakfast, so she left the church to walk the short distance to his house. Hope filled her for the first time since she'd been attacked. She faced a fresh start on her life in a new town where no one except her future husband knew about the taint upon her. Munching crisp bacon, Reverend Sweetwater flipped open his pocket watch. "Mr. Castle will arrive within the hour, child. But I must look in on Mr. Smith, the proprietor of one of our general stores. He has been ailing. I will return in time to make proper introductions." "Thank you, Reverend. I'm a bit nervous about meeting him." Nervous hardly touched the way she truly felt. Anxious, terrified, expectant, fearful and hope-filled all tumbled together into a knotted stomach. She prayed Mr. Castle proved to be a kind man. He could be as ugly as a mud fence for all she cared, as long as he proved to be a gentle and loving husband. Of course, child," he replied, rising from the table. "Propriety must be maintained, even in this backwater town." "Reverend?" He turned back from reaching for his hat and coat. What is he like? This Mr. Castle?" From his letter, She knew he owned the local livery stable and bred horses on a small piece of property less than a mile from Plum River. He shod horses for his customers at the stable, and was often asked to doctor sick or injured animals. Surely anyone who cared for horses had to be very kind to people, or wives, too. Reverend Sweetwater hesitated, and Francesca felt her stomach sink with dread. He's going to tell me Charlie is the town drunk and spends more time in jail than he does his home. Mr. Castle keeps to himself, he said slowly. Not much is known about him, as he doesn't talk about his past. He came here as not much more than a boy about 10 years ago. Rumors scuttle around about him as gossip will at times. But during his years in Plum River, he is known to be polite, respectable, a man who works hard and doesn't cheat his customers. He's a top hand with horses, and the mounts he sells are well broken in. I hope that answer can satisfy you. It does, Reverend, she said, hope both rising and falling within her. Rumors? Of what? What had happened in his youth? Very good. Now, I must run. I'll return shortly. Francesca cleared the dishes and washed them, then tidied the house. Reverend Sweetwater wasn't exactly slovenly, but his floor hadn't been swept in a while, and his fireplace needed a good cleaning, and his pots needed scrubbed. Trying not to dirty her best gown, she prayed for guidance as she worked. Nibbles of dread still warred with the hope in her heart. Surely God wouldn't send her so far from her home to marry the wrong man. Reverend Sweetwater returned to find her wiping mild perspiration from her face. He glanced around his home in awe. Why, child, I should host future brides more often. Come, Mr. Castle is on his way. Hastily, Francesca donned her bonnet and tied the ribbons under her chin. She brushed her hands over her gown, searching for stains she might have inadvertently put there as she worked. Taking a deep breath, she walked through the door the Reverend held open for her. Standing on the porch, she waited as her future husband arrived at the steps and removed his hat. A big man with heavy shoulders, Charlie Castle appeared to be in his upper 20s, a few years older than she. He kept his brown hair cut short, and wore a leather vest over his blue shirt. Yet, it was his eyes she looked at most closely, fearing to find a hard shine to them, indicative of a man who perhaps owned a less than kind soul. Instead, she thought his deep-set whiskey-colored eyes were the saddest she'd ever encountered. Miss Francesca Delaney, the Reverend intoned formally, may I present Mr. Charlie Castle? Francesca offered him a tiny curtsy as he removed his hat and returned her politeness with a small bow. Pleased to meet you at last, Mr. Castle. And you, Miss Delaney. His voice, deep and rich, intrigued her. She accepted his hand to walk her down the steps and gazed up at him. He wasn't truly handsome, but he certainly wasn't as ugly as a mud fence either. His smile was probably his best feature, warm and sweet with even white teeth. With your blessing, Reverend, he said, glancing past her, I thought to walk with Miss Delaney down the street. Perhaps show her my stables. Of course, sir, of course, the Reverend replied, his eyes crinkling. I do not fear for her safety with you, and thus will not chaperone. Mr. Castle offered Francesca his arm. I would be most pleased if you will walk with me, ma'am. Her first instinct was to shy away from his extended hand, to refuse to take it. She caught herself before she drew back, afraid, and scolded herself. If you can't trust your future husband, whom can you trust? Smiling up at him, Francesca rested her fingers on his. Of course, Mr. Castle. Most folks around here call me Charlie. Charlie, then. I'm Francesca. Leaving Reverend Sweetwater to beam from the porch, Francesca felt powerful optimism rise within her, and her nervousness vanished. While she didn't consider herself the best judge of people's characters, she had the feeling that Charlie was safe. At least, she thought he was. She could still exercise good common sense even as she felt inclined to trust him. The street of the town bustled with people walking or riding by, often tipping hats or waving, a few calling greetings to Charlie. I'm afraid I'm not very good with words, Charlie said. I've looked forward to this for a long time. Now that you're here, I'm somewhat at a loss. Me, too, she admitted. Why don't you tell me a little about Plum River? Is it a nice place? Very much so, he said, smiling a little as he gazed around. Good people. Naturally, we do have a few bad apples here and there. A town drunk causes trouble on occasion. She smiled to remove any potential sting from her words. That isn't you, is it? Fortunately, he laughed. No, ma'am. I like a drink now and then, especially on a hot summer afternoon. Have you always worked with horses? His eyes brightened as he glanced down at her. I think I rode before I could walk. Horses are my passion. Plum River has been growing in recent years, more folks arriving to homestead, build cattle ranches. The land out there isn't much good for farming, but it's top-notch grazing country. So, your business has grown as well? I do fairly well. Have a couple of breeding stallions, good mares. Some new ranchers buy my colts to break them in themselves. Here's my place. Chapter 4. Francesca glanced up at the long building with the simple sign overhead that read livery, and beneath it, horses for sale. It stood between the bank and Luna's Mercantile, with smaller shops further down and across the street. A hotel stood across the street next to the saloon where faint piano music drifted on the air. Over her shoulder, she saw a tall white building that could only be the local boarding house. Charlie escorted her through the wide-open doors into a huge barn half-filled with curious horses. Bales of hay and straw lined the walls where bridles and reins hung from pegs. Saddles sat on sawhorses. Francesca breathed in the odors of horses and manure and felt delighted. Leaving Charlie, she walked toward the equine heads hanging over stall doors, bright eyes watching her avidly. Holding out her hand to them as she walked, she rubbed noses and foreheads, letting their lips flap against her skin. Careful of that dark bay there, Charlie advised. He's a good one, but he tends to nip. Sure enough, the horse half-pinned his ears, reaching for her arm as though to bite. Without thinking, she swung her hand and smacked him solidly along his cheek. Startled, the bay shook his head and backed away, his ears now up. Charlie laughed. Very good, he said. He does need to be reminded of his manners. Is he one of yours? No, he belongs to the town marshal. He pays me a couple dollars a month to keep him here. If the horse got more exercise, he wouldn't be near as ornery. Escorting her back outside, Charlie showed her his smithy, a small building behind the barn. A cold forge and an anvil stood in the middle, with barrels of water against one wall. Tools and half-made horseshoes littered a table along another. Outside of the ranchers, he said, I'm the only man in town with blacksmith skills. I shoe horses, and will also make things for folks. Knives, hatchets, scythes, iron fences. She turned to him. I had no idea you were so talented, Charlie. I'm very impressed. He coughed into his hand, his face reddening slightly. Obviously, her compliment pleased him. Well, I picked up things here and there. Now that I've showed you my work, I'll take you walking again. I'd like to hear more about you. Accepting his arm, this time with no desire to flinch, Francesca allowed him to lead her back onto the wooden sidewalk. Not much to tell you, really. You already know about my past. She couldn't meet his eyes, and she watched the ground as she walked. What happened? I applaud your courage and honesty in telling me, he said, his voice a soft rumble. Not many women would have done so. And that's one of the reasons I asked for your hand. She stopped dead. What? Charlie turned to face her. The fact that you were assaulted doesn't put me off. It was how you were forthright in your letters that convinced me you were the one I wanted to marry. But, I don't understand. She stared up at him, shocked. Did you understand what happened to me, Charlie? Most men expect their brides, unless they're widows, to be, well, pure. He smiled and took her hand. I'm not most men, Francesca. I prefer a pure heart. Over all the other letters from willing ladies I received, I liked yours best. Pulling her close to his side, he started walking again. Besides, I'm cynical enough to never truly believe that every young bride is as pure as she claims. Charlie. He chuckled. I know. That's bad of me to say. But I do believe it's quite true. Francesca didn't disbelieve him. Back home, she'd heard rumors of certain girls who willingly engaged in carnal knowledge with boys, then went on to marry other men without disclosing what they'd done. What shocked her most was that Charlie also knew it, and spoke so freely of it. Well, I am glad I didn't try to conceal it from you, she said slowly. I couldn't live with a lie between us. Charlie went oddly silent for a time, and Francesca wondered if she had said something wrong. She glanced up, finding his face had darkened, his brows furrowed. He gazed into the fields beyond the town, his eyes distant. Charlie? Oh, sorry, he said, returning his attention to her and patting her hand. Just thinking. I'm wondering if you're hungry. Down this street is a small cafe. May I buy you lunch, ma'am? Her stomach growled at the thought. Laughing, she nodded. That sounds wonderful. I am always eager for a nice meal. He eyed her slender frame. While I do like slim women, you seem to be a little too slim. Well, then, I will do what I can to put more meat on your bones. Reverend Sweetwater has extended an invitation for you to dine with us this evening, she said, smiling a little. Will you accept? Of course. I wouldn't dare miss the opportunity to eat something other than my own miserable cooking, he said, grinning. Not in a million years. Chapter 5. Francesca thought supper that night in the Reverend's home could not have been better. Charlie and Reverend Sweetwater talked and jested, including her on aspects that passed her by as she had no knowledge of the town, its inhabitants, or what they truly laughed about. But her heart swelled with confidence and happiness. Charlie wasn't just a kind, hard-working man, he had a deep intelligence that his bulk didn't indicate, and a smart sense of humor his sad eyes didn't reveal. As she folded her hands and rested her chin on them, gazing at him, she realized that this night his eyes didn't appear sad at all. Remember how Curtis Luna asked for a bride, and she almost didn't accept him? Sweetwater asked. Never was I more pleased to preside over their wedding. God be praised. Didn't her friend, what was her name, finally marry that rancher? No, my friend. Dan Ellis didn't marry Ella. She up and married Jess Gentry. I remember him. Brought a colt to me to shoe. Said the darn thing wouldn't stand for him. But the colt behaved like a mild milk cow for me. They got hitched? Yes, sir. Months ago, now. Dan Ellis up and found a runaway bride to marry. A girl from Suicide Falls whose expected fiancé rejected her, poor girl. But Dan Ellis is now the happiest man in Plum River. Charlie gazed at Francesca, his eyes bright, a small smile playing on his mouth. I think I'll have the man beat for that title. Francesca blushed. Her day spent with Charlie was the happiest she'd ever had in her life. He wasn't just kind and considerate, nor was it his acceptance of her past. She enjoyed her time with him, loved every moment they spent together. Though she knew it was sinful, she compared Charlie to her ex-fiancé, John. While Charlie was kind, John was arrogant. Charlie seemed to enjoy her company, while John tolerated her. Charlie accepted her, while John cast her amongst the evil in the world. Charlie worked for his living, while John had inherited his wealth from his father and loafed. How could I have ever wanted to marry John? Though Francesca condemned her attacker, she wondered if he was perhaps a blessing in disguise. He saved her from an unhappy marriage with John, and brought her to Wyoming to marry the one she was quickly believing to be the best man in the world. She almost forgave him in that moment. Almost. Charlie rose from the table. I am sorry, but I reckon I should go. It's late, and I must be up early. Of course. Will you be seeing our Francesca tomorrow? Charlie's eyes held hers. Only death will keep me from her. Blushing, Francesca gazed at the table. I should clear up the dishes. Thank you, Charlie, for your visit. May I take you out for a ride tomorrow? The day should be fair and pleasant. Reverend, do you have any objections? None for tomorrow, no. But the day after is Sunday, and hopefully, you'll both at church for services. Yes, Reverend, they both answered at the same time and smiled at each other. That night, Francesca dreamed in the small room attached to the church. She and Charlie were standing with Reverend Sweetwater, prepared to repeat their wedding vows before God. But a huge black dog bolted inside, barking and snarling, foam flecking its jowls. She cowered back in fear as Charlie drew a gun and fired. She woke, frightened, listening to thunder growl in the distance. Lightning flickered through the small window above her head. Just a dream. Probably from the storm. She covered herself with the blanket, shivering, but it was a long time before she slept. Chapter 6. Charlie's prediction of fair weather for riding didn't arrive on schedule. Francesca, up earlier than usual, spent time cleaning the church as well as her own room. The overcast sky threatened more rain, and as she waited for Charlie, she wore a heavy woolen cloak to keep the chill wind at bay. She wondered if Charlie might want to push their ride to another day, thinking this was a day more suited to drinking a hot beverage beside a blazing fire. Charlie rode down the main street of town on a tall red horse, leading a smaller, saddled and bridled, gray with a charcoal mane and tail. Francesca rose from where she sat on the porch steps, excitement lighting her stomach. Though she'd only met Charlie the day before, she thought herself half in love with him already. So much so, she'd forego an afternoon beside a fire to ride next to him out in the cold. Was that what love was? He brought both horses to a stop at the porch, his smile as endearing as it was yesterday. Dismounting, he pulled his hat from his head. "Greetings, Francesca. Would you care to take a short ride with me?" "I would love to." Taking her by the hand, Charlie led her to the gray gelding. "This is a young fellow, but he's got some pretty smooth gaits on him. Has a few brains in his head to boot. He's beautiful." Francesca stroked his soft nose, gazing into the deep dark eyes. The horse munched his bit and suddenly yawned, his dark eyes rolling back in his head. His breath smelled of sweet hay and grass, the pink muscle of his tongue flexing under the bit. She giggled. "Sorry. Am I keeping you from your nap?" Gathering the reins, Francesca put her foot in the stirrup, and swung into the saddle as Charlie held the gray's bridle. She hadn't ridden much at home in Toledo, nor did her family own a horse. Anywhere she needed to go, she either walked or caught rides in wagons or carriages with neighbors. Charlie set her boots into the stirrups, and placed his hand over hers, gazing up. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked. "I can see you're not a rider." She smiled. "Yes, Charlie, I'm sure. I've got you here with me, don't I?" "Yes, ma'am. If I'm going to marry a horseman," she added as he walked to his own mount, "I should learn how to ride. You'll teach me, won't you?" He grabbed hold of his saddle horn and vaulted into his saddle with a single fluid motion. "Of course," he replied, finding his own stirrups and picking up his reins. "Today we'll just walk quietly along the road." He reined his horse around, and Francesca followed him. Leading her past the stage and train station toward the edge of town, he reined in long enough for her to catch up and ride beside him. He eyed her up and down. "Not too bad," he said. "Give him a little more rein and keep your heels down." "Like this?" "Yup. Now, keeping your heels down helps keep you centered and balanced in the saddle. That way, if your horse goes sideways suddenly, you go with him." Francesca contemplated his face, marveling at his kind and gentle way of teaching, instruction mixed with explanation and praise. She remembered how John tried to instruct her on how to care for his 2 hunting dogs, screaming at her, calling her an idiot. "That's it," Charlie said. "You keep your left hand on the reins so your right hand is ready for roping." "Will I be roping?" She laughed. "Could be." He sounded serious, which caused her to laugh again. The wind picked up as they left town behind them, a brisk cold breeze that tossed their horses' manes and made her shiver. She hadn't thought to bring gloves, and her hand on her reins grew quickly cold. Wanting to use her right hand on the reins so she could warm her left, she quickly switched. The gray horse paid no attention, but Charlie reached over to take her hand in his to warm it. Not the beautiful day I'd envisioned, he said. Want to go back? No. Let's go a little farther. The hard-packed road took them westward into the prairie with its tall grass bending under the wind, much of what Francesca remembered from the stage journey. Small herds of pronghorn antelope galloped away from their threat, while a red-tailed hawk screamed from on high. Another answered it, further away. This is a beautiful country, isn't, she said. Charlie gazed around, smiling a little. It is. It's wild and dangerous as an untamed stallion, and I doubt it can ever be tamed. Thunder growled in the distance. On the horizon, the clouds thickened, growing darker with the threat of another storm. On the wind, Francesca scented sage mixed with rain, and thought it wonderful. How long before that gets here? She asked. An hour, maybe. We'll go just a little further, then head back. As they walked their horses onward, they passed a few farmers in buckboards heading for town, likely to obtain supplies, and some cowboys on their horses with lariats tied to their saddles and their rifles in scabbards. Most greeted Charlie with familiarity and smiles while no doubt wondering who Francesca was. Thunder grumbled again, and the dark clouds lit up briefly with lightning deep within its depths. Time to head back, Charlie said. I'm not as tough as you, wanting to ride through a darn autumn storm. Francesca reined her gelding in a circle toward town when a bolt of lightning shot nearly over their heads. The exploding thunder followed instantly on its heels. Both horses spooked. Charlie's horse bolted forward several steps before he reined the snorting horse in. Francesca's gray lunged sideways. Unable to keep her balance or her seat, she flew out of the saddle and struck the hard road on her hip and shoulder, her head slamming the packed dirt. Stunned and slightly winded, Francesca lay for a moment, wondering if she was hurt badly. She heard Charlie cursing under his breath and the creak of leather as he swung out of his saddle. He knelt beside her, his face a dark mask of worry. Are you hurt? Francesca, talk to me. Are you all right? I think so, she answered, her hip and head both pounding. Lifting her hand for him to help her up, she realized that she hadn't broken any bones, and it was just her pride that was bruised. Go slowly, he said, helping her to stand. Are you dizzy? How's your vision? Is it doubled? No, really, I'm all right, she said, walking some of the stiffness from her hip. She smiled at him. And I have a hard head. He didn't chuckle at her attempt at humor. Fool horse, he grumbled. Think you can walk back to town? Why walk when I have a perfectly fine horse to ride? But isn't it said that if you get bucked off you get back on? Well, yes, but Francesca walked to the quiet gelding, who stood patiently nearby. Picking up the reins, she let Charlie help her get into the saddle. Her hip protested and she now had a headache, but she felt no fear of returning to the back of the horse. I'll lead him, then, Charlie said, trying to take the reins from her. No, please. If I'm ever to learn to ride, I have to be able to do it myself. He paused, gazing up at her. You have some guts, ma'am. Many women wouldn't have gotten back on, and then the fear settles in permanently. I told you, if I'm to marry a horseman, I should learn to ride. Isn't falling off and getting back on part of the process? He grinned. Why, yes, I believe it is. Can't tell you how many times I've been tossed, thrown, and bucked off in my lifetime. Vaulting back into his saddle, he said. You still amaze me. Francesca's head hurt a little too much for chuckling, but she managed to smile. Now, sir, if you don't mind, I think I'd like to get in out of this weather. That storm is getting too close, and I'm not keen on hitting the ground again. Chapter 7. Francesca sat on a bale of hay in Charlie's barn as he untacked, groomed and put the horses in their stalls. Outside, the wind had changed from a stiff breeze to a howling gale with icy rain riding on its wings. They returned to town just as the temperature dropped and the storm arrived. Though out of the direct wind, the open barn door let in too much cold air. Francesca shivered inside her cloak. The hotel serves coffee and hot cocoa in their drawing room, Charlie said as he worked. As well as tea and biscuits. Would you care to join me? As long as I'm warm, she replied, trying to still her chattering teeth. And this isn't even winter yet. The wind does tend to cut, he agreed. There's isn't much to block the wind off the mountains. Are there truly whiteouts here? Sure. He paused in his work to eye her. Does that alarm you? A little. But as long as I'm inside with a fire and plenty of wood, I'll be fine. As comfortable around him as she'd become, she no longer flinched when he reached for her. Running her arm through his, he led her out of the barn, and swung the big doors closed. Heavy drops of cold rain splattered them as they hurried across the street to the hotel. Warmth from the huge fire roaring on the hearth greeted her chilled face and hands as Charlie escorted her inside. The large drawing room held small tables and chairs with a few guests at them, who glanced up curiously as they walked in. Permitting Charlie to remove her cloak and lead her to a table near the fire, Francesca sat down on the chair he held for her. She smiled at the proprietor, who eyed her curiously as she took their orders for hot cocoa and biscuits. No doubt, seeing Charlie Castle with a young lady on his arm was worth a second look. She wondered how much of the town's rumor mill revolved around her. Are you warm enough? Charlie asked, taking his own seat. Does your head still hurt? It aches, she admitted. I'll be fine, Charlie. Please don't worry. It's my fault, he muttered. He fell silent as the man in his spotless white apron brought them cups, a plate of biscuits, and poured the delicious-smelling cocoa for them. He left the steaming pot on the table and departed. Francesca sipped her chocolate, careful not to burn her tongue. This isn't exactly how I wanted this to go, he muttered, digging into his jacket pocket. Oddly, his face turned a dark red, and he refused to look at her. Wanted what to go? Francesca nibbled a biscuit, discovering her jaw also ached. As did her left shoulder and arm all the way to her wrist. I'm going to be very sore tomorrow. This. For a moment, Francesca gazed only at his earnest, sweet face, before she dropped her gaze to what he held in his fingers. A gold band with a small diamond. She stared, her heart beating wildly in her chest. Dropping the biscuit, her hand went to her throat. I'm not seeing this. Is that? It was my mother's, he said, his deep voice whisper soft. His brown eyes never wavered from her face. I wanted to place this ring on the hand of my bride. Will you marry me, Francesca? Tears stung her eyes and rolled down her face. Choking, she tried to speak, but her throat strangely would not obey her. Drawing a deep breath freed her from her stillness, permitting her to nod her head. Yes, she croaked, smiling through her tears. Yes, I will marry you. His face split into a wide grin, and he reached across the table to take her left hand in both of his. The ring slipped onto her finger as though coming home at last. I guess this means I can kiss you now. Standing, Charlie stepped around the table, lifting her to her feet. Francesca closed her eyes as his lips settled over hers. Happiness and love poured from her heart into that first kiss. She longed to fling her arms around his neck, only remembering the watching eyes in the hotel's drawing room in time. As Charlie broke their kiss, staring down at her with a smile filled with love and tenderness, the room erupted into applause. They both jerked their heads around. Congratulations, chimed guests from their tables. Congratulations to the happy couple. Grinning, Francesca took her seat again as Charlie smiled, blushed to his hairline, and thanked the customers. Your visit here is on the house, announced a person she assumed was the proprietor as he arrived from the kitchen. Dinner will be served within the hour. I beg you remain and enjoy our hospitality. Thank you, Francesca said, her blush heating her face. Chapter 8. Francesca couldn't wait to show Reverend Sweetwater her ring. He was home when Charlie walked her to the Reverend's door, as lamps burned within and a fire blazed on the hearth. There, he kissed her good night, and walked away into the darkness, leaving her to dash inside to find the Reverend in his armchair by the fire. What is it, my dear? He asked, his voice muzzy. Clearly, he'd been asleep. My ring, Reverend, she said, holding her hand under his nose. Charlie proposed this afternoon. Oh, he did? Sweetwater sat upright, taking her hand to peer myopically down at it. Why isn't that lovely? Child, I am so happy for you. When is the wedding? Oh, well, we haven't set a date yet, she admitted, admiring the ring in the light of the fire. Soon, though, so I can get out of your hair. Nonsense, girl. He sniffed, settling into his chair again. It's been wonderful having you around. After you're married, I may request your services to look after this house and the church. For a small stipend, of course. I can't believe it. Francesca whirled around, taking off her cloak and setting it over the back of a chair. I'm engaged to marry the most wonderful man in the world. With his mother's ring, too. Sweetwater's smile vanished. Did you, say, that's his mother's ring? Why, yes. Isn't it so terribly romantic? His father set this ring on his mother's hand almost 30 years ago, saying, maybe, I will bequeath this to my son, our son, one day. Only then did Francesca notice that the Reverend seemed to hardly listen and stared into the fire. He no longer smiled, and his brows drew together in a wizened frown. For some reason, his previous joy at the news of her engagement had vanished. Reverend? He gave a start, snorting, as though from a deep sleep. What? Oh, yes, Francesca, dear. Yes, of course. When you set your wedding date, I will clear my schedule and preside at your wedding. Have you given any thought to who will stand up for you? We were talking about my ring. Francesca closed her other hand over it protectively as Reverend Sweetwater rambled on, uneasiness settling into her stomach. Why did the mention of this ring upset him so? You should meet people in town, Francesca, and I highly recommend Mr. and Mrs. Luna. From the store. Good people. Good upstanding Christians. Now pardon me, but I must write my sermon for the morrow. Good night, Francesca. He kissed her cheek and helped her back into her cloak for the short walk to the church and her room. On legs she barely felt, she walked out of the Reverend's home and into the wind that still howled. The rain had long since ceased, but her sturdy boots sucked through viscous mud. The church's stove had been filled and lit against the cold, and warmth filled the small building. She added more wood from the pile, stripping off her cloak. She hadn't felt the need to bar the church door at night, but this night she brought the sturdy length of wood down and fitted it into its slots. She did the same with the back door, and when she made certain the small stove in her room had plenty of wood, she locked that door as well, with herself inside. Lying under the blanket, the stove's heat sending its tendrils through the small room, Francesca felt that she'd never sleep. But she did, and she dreamt of a vicious black dog attacking her at her wedding. Chapter 9. Her eyes gritty and sore, her body aching, her hips screaming and her head thumping, Francesca attended church services with Charlie by her side. She reassured his worry that she was fine, just sore from her fall, but she didn't mention Sweetwater's very odd reaction the previous evening, nor her nightmare. As she listened to the sermon, she knew Charlie shot her concerned glances that did nothing to dispel his anxiety, and she hoped she could use her physical aches as an excuse to return to her tiny room for privacy. As she and her newly betrothed walked from the church into the bright sunshine that promised a pleasant day, they found their path blocked by 2 men and 2 women. Francesca, with a flash of memory of her attack crossing her mind, cringed. Charlie stood fast, tall, big and immovable. Yes, he said. Charlie, we've never met, but I'm Curtis Luna and this is my wife, Roxy. Roxy and Ella Gentry here, were mail-order brides. We thought, well, they thought more than us, that they needed to welcome Miss Delaney into our community. Charlie shook hands with Mr. Luna, and greeted Jess Gentry with a smile. Got another wild colt, Jess, he chuckled. Mrs. Gentry, a pleasure to meet you at last. Mrs. Luna, likewise. May I present my intended? This is Miss Francesca Delaney. Francesca's mouth dropped. Not from meeting citizens from the town and mail-order brides to boot, but at the change that came over Charlie. When she'd met him, she knew he hardly spoke to anyone, never mixed with the people of the town, and now, this? as self-assured and genial as the mayor himself. Numb, she shook hands and made polite noises at the two couples, half fearing they'd magically pluck from her memory her attack and publicly denounce her as a harlot. Mrs. Luna smiled. "Miss Delaney, would you care to join us? There's a small gathering of church ladies for tea at the town hall." Yes." She tried to smile, hoping it looked less lopsided than it felt. "I'd love to." Ella Gentry took her arm. "I'm Ella, and she's Roxy, and we're going to call you Francesca. Unless you like to be called Franny. Or Fran." Francesca actually laughed. "My grandmother called me Franny." "I like Franny," Ella announced. "Come along while the tea is hot." Roxy waved over their shoulders at the three men. "Later, boys. Try to stay out of trouble." Despite her pleasure with the two young women, Francesca still limped and her body ached. She tried to conceal it, but both Roxy and Ella stopped, concerned. "What's wrong?" Roxy asked. "Are you hurt?" "It's nothing, really," she said, trying to keep up, smiling and blushing. "I fell off a horse yesterday. Poor Charlie is trying to teach me to ride." "I bet Mrs. Donovan has a cure for her pain," Ella stated. "After tea, we should ask her." "No, please, Ella. I'll be all right in a day or two. I don't want to be a problem for anyone." Both girls slid their arms under hers and helped carry her weight. Francesca, not having many girlfriends in Ohio, found herself feeling pampered and fussed over as the two helped her to a table in the town hall, sat her down, then proceeded to fire questions at her. "So?" Ella said eagerly, sitting down with her chin on her fist. Her cup of tea cooled, forgotten, in front of her. "How'd Charlie find you?" Gulping, smiling as she glanced at her two new friends, Francesca skipped over the worst of her situation. "Well, I was to marry a man in Ohio," she said. "It didn't work out. My father was furious, and put me out of his house." "No!" Ella and Roxy exclaimed as one. "How cruel," Ella said. "I reached out to our local priest, who told me about the mail-order bride agency. And, well, Charlie liked my letter best. After I arrived on the stage, he asked Reverend Sweetwater to look after me as we get to know each other better. He asked me to marry him yesterday." Both sighed happily in unison, and Roxy dabbed her eyes with her kerchief. "That's so romantic." "Except for the falling off the horse part," Ella added. But she squeezed Francesca's hand. "Your Charlie is so handsome," she said, her voice a half-whisper. "Don't tell Jess I said that." Torn between showing the girls her ring, and not revealing it out of fear she'd receive the same reaction as the Reverends, Francesca kept her left hand covered with her right. "I have to know. One way or another." "He put this on my finger," she said, her voice low. She uncovered the ring. It was his mother's. Roxy gasped while Ella picked up Francesca's hand to examine it more closely. "It's beautiful, Franny," she said, awed. "You are so lucky," Roxy sighed. "I love Curtis to the moon and back, but he doesn't have a romantic bone in his body." "Of course, he does," Ella scolded. "Remember how he spent that single afternoon picking wildflowers for you? Took him so long because he couldn't decide which were the prettiest." Encouraged, Francesca felt a knot in her stomach loosen. "How did your marriages happen?" she asked, sipping her hot tea. Often talking over one another, Roxy and Ella explained how, as friends, they decided to come west after Ella's husband died in a hunting accident. Roxy pretended to want a husband, but secretly planned to return home as soon as Ella got married. As she spoke, Francesca remembered Sweetwater telling Charlie how the Luna marriage almost didn't happen. And Ella explained how she was to marry a rancher named Dan, but married Jess instead. "What happened to this Dan fellow?" she asked. Ella smiled. "He's still our friend. At the time, he just, didn't know how to be near a lady. It doesn't make him a bad person or anything, but it was awkward." "I can imagine," Francesca said, meaning it. "What do you know of Charlie?" Ella and Roxy glanced at one another. Nothing bad, Franny, Ella said carefully. Just that no one in town knows anything about him. He won't speak of his past, where he came from, anything. Roxy elbowed Ella. He's a private person. Franny, don't you worry. Charlie has a good name in this town. You couldn't marry a better man. I know. She stared at her teacup, wondering how much she could confess to her new friends. I've been having dreams. Glancing up, she met their fascinated gazes. Bad dreams. Like omens? What dreams? Ella asked. Her blonde curls cascaded over her shoulder as she put her hand on Francesca's arm. Francesca tried to laugh, but knew it held no humor, and realized they knew it, too. My wedding to Charlie. A black dog attacks me. It scares me. Roxy put her hand over Francesca's. Listen. You just came through a bad experience at home, a very long, she chuckled, trip to Plum River, Wyoming. You are exhausted, girl. You have fears and worries, on top of that long trip. Give yourself some mercy. This is what? Your third day in Plum River? Your mind is overwhelming you, believe me. Just get yourself rested, and everything will be fine. I promise. All but crying, Francesca smiled through eyes blurred by tears. You promise? Roxy put her right hand over her breast. God is my witness, she intoned solemnly. You are going to be just fine. Chapter 10. Whether it was through sheer exhaustion or Roxy's oath, Francesca slept the entire night without dreaming. When she woke and stretched, yawning, her headache was gone, though her hip and shoulder were still sore. Despite her remaining aches and bruises, she rose and washed, dressed herself and pinned her long braid to the nape of her neck. Perhaps due to the sleep and her friend's assurance, she found her spirits rising with the new day. At the Reverend's home, she prepared his breakfast of eggs, bacon and fried potatoes. She hummed as she worked, thinking it was time to launder clothes. As with his cooking and housekeeping, Reverend Sweetwater sorely neglected to wash his clothes on a regular basis. Her own were almost as bad as she could scarcely wash them on the stagecoach. Charlie would spend his day working with his horses, but would return to the house for supper. Delicious, delicious, Sweetwater moaned happily, devouring her cooking with gusto. He wiped up egg yolk and bacon grease from his plate with a chunk of bread, and washed it down with coffee. I must pay calls on my parishioners who reside outside of town, he said, wiping his mouth. I will be gone most of the day. Why don't you buy yourself something nice with this? He set a $1 bill on the table. Part of that stipend I mentioned. No, Reverend, Francesca said hastily. You have given me food and shelter when I needed it. That is enough. And you have repaid me twice over, Francesca, with all the work you have done on my behalf. Please do me the honor of not arguing. Francesca bowed her head. All right, Reverend. He stood up from the table, and slipped on his black frock coat. He patted her shoulder, his eyes crinkling as he smiled. You are a good woman, Francesca. I've grown very fond of you. Thank you, Reverend. Bless you. After he'd gone, Francesca stared at the $1. In all her young life, she'd very seldom had money to spend on herself. Just what should I buy with it? Hair ribbons? A new bonnet? Something for the wedding? Tucking the bill in her pocket, she set to cleaning the dishes and the house. As she worked, she found she looked forward to a small shopping trip to the Luna's store. By early afternoon, with the clothes on the line to dry and the Reverend's house and the church clean, Francesca tied the ribbons of her bonnet under her chin and walked down the street. In her small cloth handbag, she had not only the $1 Sweetwater gave her, but also the few bills Father Daniel had pressed into her hand back in Ohio. She wouldn't spend it all, of course, that would be careless and quite selfish. No, she brought the rest in case what she wanted cost a little more than her single $1. Roxy greeted her arrival with a squeal and a healthy embrace. It's so good to see you again, Franny. I do hope this is a social visit. Come, say hello to Curtis. She took Francesca by the hand, and all but dragged her to the back storeroom and office where her husband sat behind a desk. He stood, smiling, as Roxy said, "Curtis, you remember Francesca? How can I possibly forget such a nice young lady? Miss Delaney, how nice to see your pleasant face." She laughed, blushing. "Call me Francesca, please. And you should direct your compliments to your lovely wife." "Believe you me, Francesca," Curtis said with a wink, "she gets enough praise heaped on her head. I think it has doubled in size." "Pooh," Roxy snorted, slapping his arm. "Girls never get enough compliments from men. Come on, let's leave him to his work while we have ourselves some girl talk." However, upon walking back to the front of the store, Roxy discovered she had customers. As she waited on them, Francesca wandered around the store, examining hair ribbons, fingering bolts of cloth, considering and dismissing various things she might buy as not being special enough. She definitely wanted to buy something special. Then she saw it. It sat in a glass case with various pieces of jewelry, new revolvers, eyeglass frames, and other specialty items. It was a slender gold chain for a man's pocket watch. She had noted that Charlie's current chain had been mended and repaired with bits of wire, and would need new wiring soon. "See something you like?" Francesca glanced up at Curtis. "Yes." "How much is that watch chain?" "Madam, that is $2. Expensive, I know. But the chain is pure gold." "I'll take it." His brows rose. "Francesca, I wish I could drop the price for you." "No need." Digging in her handbag, she placed 2 bills on the counter. Curtis whistled. "Had I known you were a wealthy woman, I'd have married you instead of Roxy." "Curtis." He laughed at the shout from down the counter, then winked at his wife. "Just joking, dear. Francesca, I'll wrap that up for you. Your Charlie is a lucky man." Francesca smiled as he pulled the chain from the case and carefully folded it into a small piece of brown paper. "No, I'm the fortunate one." He handed the bundle to her. "I hope we get an invitation to the wedding. If you're not there, I'll shop down the street at the Smith place." "Ha! We'll be there." Francesca tucked the parcel securely in her bag, and waved in farewell. "Come back soon," Roxy called as Francesca walked toward the door. "I will." Chapter 11. Though the day was warm and sunny with a light breeze, Francesca knew the clothes on the line wouldn't be dry yet. Thus, with a few hours to herself, she chose to walk through the town and enjoy the feeling a little freedom on a fine day engendered. Wondering if she should give the chain to Charlie at supper tonight, or save it for their wedding, she smiled at the men who rode or walked by, and greeted the town's few matrons she passed. Pausing just beyond the bat-wing doors of the saloon, she listened to the piano music and the sound of a woman's raucous singing. She shuddered, thinking how close she had come to becoming a woman of ill repute. She murmured a prayer for the singer inside, remembering what Father Daniel had said about those less fortunate. Everyone was God's child. Finishing her walk, Francesca stopped at Charlie's livery stable, thinking to go in and see if he was there. The afternoon waned toward evening, informing her she should go in to say hello, then head to the Reverend's house to take down the laundry and start supper. Chicken and dumplings. Charlie told her it was one of his favorites. As she started in, she heard men's voices, but neither of them was Charlie. Hesitating, not wanting to go inside the barn with strange men there, she intended to simply walk past and go home. But when the voices mentioned Charlie's name, she stopped. Though eavesdropping was wrong, she moved as close as she could to the doors and listened. "He ought to be run out of town on a rail," one voice said, "instead of marrying that putty little gal." One of them hawked and spat. "If what you heard is true, Castle should be hung." Hung. Her heart hammering in her breast and her mouth dry, Francesca edged closer to the door. The men's voices came through to her clearly. "Can't hang a man for what can't be proved. Never did prove he killed her. Don't that beat all? Kill your own mother and set her on fire, and then get off scot-free. Ain't that just plumb wrong?" Francesca thought she would faint. Her head spun and her stomach churned, as though she were about to vomit. Charlie killed his mother? Set her on fire? Oh, dear God. No wonder the Reverend got so upset over her engagement ring. Francesca stared down at the ring on her finger in horror. Charlie asked her to marry him and gave her his victim's diamond as a promise? Her hands shaking, she pulled the wretched thing from her finger and stared at it on her palm. Wanting to throw it into the street, she instead thrust it away in her bag. He'll want it back. Could it be true? But how? Charlie was kind to her. He would never do such a dreadful thing. Never. But what did she really know about him? If she were honest, not much at all. How could she marry someone suspected of such a horror? She gripped her stomach, knowing she was going to be sick. She willed herself to stay calm. Keep breathing. Was he a murderer? And if not, how did such rumors start? And didn't rumors always have a grain of truth in them? If Charlie killed his own mother, what would stop him from killing her, too? On numb legs, she stumbled away from the livery. She couldn't go back and face the Reverend yet. Did he suspect? No, of course not. He wouldn't allow her to marry Charlie if he believed such things. She was being foolish. How dare she listen to such lies about her betrothed? Her hand went to her throat as she walked blindly down the street. Oh, Lord, he was coming for supper. Not knowing where she was going, she walked past the town's shops and buildings, past the church and the train station. On she walked, seeing nothing except the burned corpse of a woman in her mind's eyes. She needed to get herself under control. She was being unfair to Charlie. She needed to let him explain himself. Surely, they would have a good laugh about this later. But she didn't turn back. She kept walking, her mind still spinning. As the sun slipped behind the Grand Tetons, the air grew colder, and the breeze stilled. Uncaring that she could freeze to death, or that a predator might catch her, she left the road and walked out onto the vast prairie. She needed to get away. Be calm and think. Yes, she needed to think. How foolish she was being to even listen to such things. But the words wouldn't leave her mind. They dug deeper and deeper until she nearly wept with them. She should have known. After all the travail she'd suffered, she should have known that Charlie couldn't be as good as she'd thought. Waist-high grass tickled her arms while coyotes yapped in the distance. An owl hooted somewhere to her right. A small creature hurried away from her feet, a tiny rustling among the stems. In her mind, Charlie's smile became sinister, twisting and darkening until his image was crowded out by the dark brown dog of her nightmares. Chasing her. Snapping at her. She kept walking, trying to shake the image. The stars burned brightly overhead. The cold sank deep into her bones, but she didn't try to keep warm by rubbing her arms or moving faster to keep her blood circulating. She tripped over rocks and cactus, and once almost tumbled headlong into a ravine. Instead of trying to climb down and cross it, she merely followed it as it meandered across the prairie. She navigated by the newly risen moon, her night's vision keen enough for her to see fairly well. She was good and lost by then. What a fool she was. Why had she wandered off like that? Anybody with half a brain would have gone directly to Charlie and asked him to explain. A thicket of trees sprouted near the ravine, a nice place to take shelter. She disturbed a few rabbits as she dropped to her knees and hunkered down under the low branches. She couldn't help curling up against the cold, her shivering unabated, as she rested her head on her folded arm. So cold. So tired. Francesca dropped into a troubled and exhausted sleep. Chapter 12. Men's voices and the snorting of horses woke her. Blinking, her limbs so stiff she could barely move, Francesca carefully sat up. By the sun in the sky, she judged it was mid-morning. Why am I not dead? She rubbed her arms, feeling the sun's rays warm on her skin, leaching the cold from her bones. Peering about, she saw 3 men on horseback in a tight bunch, but from her angle of vision she couldn't identify them. Cowboys searching for cattle, she surmised. If I don't move, maybe they won't see me. There she is. Was that Curtis's voice? Knowing she could never outrun men on horses, she huddled in the thicket, terrified Charlie was with them. Lord, don't let him find me. I am so ashamed. Drawing her knees to her chest, she hid her face, shaking with fear, hoping against hope they'd go away and leave her alone. Francesca. Charlie's voice. A low moan crept from her throat against her will as she tried to crawl deeper into the thicket. Trapped like an animal, tears wet her skirts as she listened to him dismount his horse and walk toward her through the tall grass. Francesca, what happened? What are you doing way out here? She lifted her eyes enough to see his face as he knelt, his deep-set brown eyes filled with relief and fear. I've been worried sick, he said. I got half the town searching for you since daylight. His hand reached for her. Recoiling, Francesca tried to squirm deeper into the branches, but her back struck the tree. She could retreat no further. Charlie withdrew, his expression darkened, his mouth turned down, his face a mask of worry and distress. He held up his hand, palm forward, the gesture expressing his peaceful intentions. Francesca, it's me. It's your Charlie. What's wrong with her? Past his broad shoulder, she saw Curtis dismount, and she recognized Jess Gentry as the third horseman. Jess and Curtis exchanged quick concerned glances. Lord, make them go away. Please. Don't know, Charlie answered. She's spooked pretty good, though. I heard them, she whispered. Charlie froze. His dark eyes bored into hers. What? I heard them. Your mother. Burnt. I thought. You'll burn me, too. Slumping to the ground, Charlie gave her a desperate look. Where did you hear that? Francesca lifted her face further from the protection of her knees. Doesn't matter. And her ring, sobs choked her throat, stifled her breath, her terror engulfing her. Please go away. This was a mistake. No. Please. Misery and shame filled her voice. You deserve to know, he said, his voice low, his dark eyes determined. I know what you heard. I know the rumors about me. I was going to tell you, soon. But I hadn't got the chance. My mother died, yes, but I didn't kill her. My father did. Francesca caught her breath. What? He ran his hands through his hair, not seeming to care that Jess and Curtis listened closely to what he said. My father wasn't a nice man, he said, his tone hard, crisp. He had a very hot temper and a shorter fuse. He was a good provider, and he worked hard training horses. Yet, he often beat my mother, sometimes me. The people in town, a place near Denver in the Colorado Territory, never knew what he was really like. My mother was too ashamed, as was I. We never spoke of it. One night, he went too far, hit her too hard. Her head struck the stove. Charlie stared down at his hands, and his voice grew thick with emotion. She may have had some foresight, knew what would happen one day. About a year before her death, she took her wedding ring and a few other things that were dear to her, and gave them to me for safekeeping. She told me that one day I should give her wedding ring to my own bride, despite my protests that she should keep it. You see, in spite of everything, she still loved my father. Her ring was her proudest possession, and she wanted it passed on. I know he loved her too, in his own twisted way, but his temper got out of hand. Francesca uncoiled her arms from her knees. She wanted to reach for him, speak to him, but she remained silent. I don't think he intended to kill her that night, Charlie went on. It was mostly an accident. But he did kill her. She died instantly when her head hit the corner of the stove. My father took her body in his arms, weeping, crying out that he was sorry, that he didn't mean for it to happen. I was 15 years old, Francesca, not even a man. I didn't know what to do. In my horror and grief, I screamed at him, beating him with my fists, trying to take her away from him. In the struggle, the stove pipe broke, and sparks flew from it. We didn't notice the house on fire until it was almost too late. Pausing in his story, Charlie rubbed his hands over his face, his eyes filled with unshed tears. This time, Francesca did reach for him and clasped his hand. My father burned himself getting me out of the house, Charlie went on. But in keeping me alive, he was forced to leave my mother's body behind. So, she burned, as the stories say. My father confessed his crime to the sheriff. But it was too late for me. The rumors had started. They spread like these things do, following me like the plague. I was never implicated in her death, Francesca, never stood accused of harming her. In his guilt and grief, my father took his gun and shot himself in the head. His hand gripped hers so hard it hurt. I couldn't stay there, Francesca, I couldn't. Too many painful memories in that town. I sold the land and the horses, and rode north. The rumors followed me like evil spirits, because I fled. To most, that was an admission of guilt. With every town I tried to settle in, people talked behind my back, claimed I murdered my own mother until I moved again to escape the whispers. I came here, to Plum River, and stayed, determined to ride out the gossip. He glanced over his shoulder at Curtis and Jess. He gave them a rueful smile. This town wasn't as bad as others, he said, turning back to Francesca. A few rumors, yes, but folks here gave me a chance. Still, I kept my head down and kept to myself, hoping I could live my life in peace. And I have, until now. Rubbing his thumb over her fingers, Charlie glanced down, now clearly seeing his mother's diamond ring no longer graced her hand. He opened his mouth, his eyes wide and distressed. Francesca forestalled him with her hand over his mouth. "It's here," she whispered. "Safe." Digging into her handbag, she pulled out the heirloom and placed it in his grip. "I feel awful," she confessed, hugging her knees again. "I should have asked you. I don't know why I wandered out here like this. Something is wrong with me, I think. Can you ever forgive me?" His eyes were hard on her face. "No, Rebecca. Nothing is wrong with you. You've been hurt, as have I." Tears spilled from her eyes as she looked at this man whom she had doubted. "Francesca, will you do something for me?" "What?" Francesca half feared he would banish her from his life. She shivered, preparing herself for his harsh words. Taking her hand, Charlie slipped the ring back on her finger. "Please, never, ever, take this off again." Sobbing, Francesca collapsed into his arms. He held her head to his shoulder, rocking her back and forth. "I buried the other things she gave me in a stall in our barn," he said softly. "They were safe from the fire. I've kept them close all these years, hoping to fulfill her request that I place her beloved ring on my bride's hand. Now I have. I ask again, Francesca, will you marry me?" Crying too hard to answer, she nodded into his shoulder until she got her emotions under control. When her sobs calmed, she raised her face to his, wiping the wetness from her cheeks with fingers that still shook. "Yes, Charlie," she said, her voice hoarse, her smile for him tremulous. "Yes, I will marry you." "Guess that means I can kiss you," he said. Again. So he did, his warm lips on hers, pouring his love into her, his arms holding her tightly around her shoulders. Kissing him back, Francesca wanted to melt into him and stay caught in his arms for the rest of her life. However, a discreet cough from behind Charlie broke them apart. Curtis offered them an embarrassed smile. Charlie, Francesca," he said, "folks will need to know she's safe. We have people still out looking for her." "He's right," Charlie said, getting to his feet and bringing her up with him. "When you didn't return to the Reverend's house, I set the town on its head looking for you. It was Jess who found your tracks early this morning." "I'm sorry I caused such a fuss," Francesca said, brushing dirt and dead leaves from her gown, again ashamed of herself. "Now, don't you get all worked up about it, Miss Francesca," Jess said, obviously reading the emotions on her face. "I can just see Ella runnin' if she heard that 'bout me. But we, and I mean most folks in town, never did believe them rumors 'bout Charlie. He's too good a man to do something so evil." I think Reverend Sweetwater believed them, she whispered. He didn't like it that you gave me your mother's ring. Curtis shrugged. In my opinion, the good Reverend tends to worry more about driving the devil out of his flock than rejoicing in the good that's in it. I doubt he truly believed them, but he worried. Do you see? Francesca nodded, unsure about that explanation, but she accepted it as Charlie guided her to his tall horse. She stopped him by turning to face him before he could pick her up and place her in his saddle. I wanted to give this to you last night, Francesca said, pulling the small parcel from her handbag. He took it from her, his deep eyes scanning her face. For me? Call it an early wedding present. But, I never gave you a present. Lifting her left hand with the precious ring, she smiled. But you did. You gave me my life back. Our life back. Charlie peered into the parcel and his face flushed with pleasure. He pulled the chain out and looked at it. Francesca thought she saw his eyes mist over, but he blinked and it was gone. He tucked the chain carefully away and placed it in his pocket. Thank you, Francesca. Now, let's get you back, he said, his voice rough with emotion. He boosted her up into the saddle and then swung up behind her. They started back toward town at a gentle pace. The sun had risen high enough to burn off the worst of the chill. Francesca leaned back into Charlie, the back of her head resting lightly on his chest. A sense of safety flowed through her. Safety and love. She closed her eyes and sent up a prayer of thanksgiving. It wasn't so long ago that she had been completely without hope. Her life had seemed over, and she'd felt doomed. When she decided to become a mail-order bride, she would never have dared hope it would lead her to someone as amazing as Charlie. But it had. It had. She snuggled against Charlie and sighed with gratitude. You all right? Charlie asked in her ear. Much, much better than all right, she murmured. Thank you, Charlie. No, he whispered right back. Thank you. The end. Thank you for listening to this heartwarming story by Susannah Calloway. You can be assured that all her books are clean and wholesome. To find other romances by Susannah Calloway, as well as the other authors at Tika House Publishing, visit www.tikahousepublishing.com. Remember to hit like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next Susannah Calloway Western romance.